I'm Matt Spicer. I'll be moderating this Q&A. Please, everybody welcome writer-director Chloe Domont and star Alden Ehrenreich. First of all, I love this film. It's a great film. And one of the things, I don't know if you've had this feeling, but one of the things that struck me about it, like, I feel like you can tell within the first 5 or 10 minutes if you're in good hands with a filmmaker. And immediately I just felt like, oh, I'm going on a ride right now. Like, she knows what she's doing. And, you know, I guess especially for a first feature, it's incredible. And so, like, where did you get your confidence? Where did that confidence come from? And how did you know that this was going to be your first film?
Well, it's funny you mention that. I always felt like I had a delusional sense of confidence most of my life. I'd say, I am a first-time, feature director, but I had been directing television, and I think I was able to stumble on other people's projects, on other people's shows, and learn and really get clear about what kind of filmmaker I am and what kind of stories I'm looking to tell. So I took my time with it. I took my time finding the story and making sure that this was the story that needed to be told. And I think there were other scripts that I wrote over the years, and to be honest, I abandoned them because I just didn't think they were good enough, or I felt like I could do better. So I think it was by torturing myself, I would say, that I eventually came to this script, and once I did, I just knew in my gut, and I could just feel it. I could feel it with this script more than I ever felt with anything else I'd written, I was just, I think because I'd spent years kind of honing and obsessing, that by the time I got to this film, I was just ready to go.
I'm almost scared to ask, but where did the inspiration for this come from?
Men.
One of my favorite subgenres of film is erotic thrillers of the 80s and 90s, like Basic Instinct, Fatal Attraction. But looking back on them now with the benefit of hindsight, those films were a reflection of a very male anxiety at the time, with sort of feminism and the rise of powerful women in the workplace. And this really sort of flips the script on that in a really interesting, cool way. Was that something that you intentionally set out to do, or was that something that organically happened through the process of developing it?
So for me, I set out to make a thriller about power dynamics within a relationship that definitely has crossovers to the erotic thriller genre. It has crossovers even to the psychological thriller genre. But for me, I wasn't interested in staying within the confines of any particular genre, and I didn't set out to kind of reinvent the erotic thriller genre in any way. I had a story that was burning inside of me, I think it felt like a story that hadn't been told yet, and I think it was really it's I write my fears, and I write what I'm afraid to confront or acknowledge, or what I feel ashamed of, and this was something that I was really compounding for many years, and I think in terms of the lens that I wanted to tell the story through, it was always a thriller, and it was interesting because when I first wrote the script and I was kind of figuring out how to pitch this film, I was calling it an emotional thriller, on some level, but because my intention was to use the genre to shine a light on an emotional terror that I feel like we all face, but we normalize. And this was a feeling that I'd only ever felt when watching films in the genre space, because I just couldn't quite shake the feeling of coming home and both fearing the person I loved, but also the person I was becoming. And that's really what drove me to writing, and making the film the way that I did.
Alden, that brings me to Alden. I don't know, I've known you for a little while now. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I've been a huge fan of your work ever since I saw you in Tetro, the Francis Ford Coppola film. You were so great in movies like Hail Caesar and Oppenheimer. You've worked with so many great filmmakers, so you know what it's like when you get sent a great piece of material and when you know you're in good hands. So what drew you to this script when you first got hold of it? What convinced you that I need to work with Chloe?
A few things. I mean, first was the material itself. It was clear that this writing was both really well constructed from a story standpoint and also really personal, and really personal in a way that felt really ambivalent. It's interesting. So I haven't done press for the movie until today for like 7 months. So it's fun to hear the answers for the first time. But what you were just saying about the person you were becoming and the person that you loved and being afraid of that read really clearly on the page, and that was something that I liked about it, which was that it was very complicated and that everyone involved was having these very, intense, complicated experiences. And then the other thing was just the resolve that Chloe had. So in the original conversations we had about doing the movie, in what were a pretty spectacular set of setbacks when it came to making it and having the sets built and then having to pause and all these things, and her composure and sort of stalwartness and determination and you can feel when something's kind of ripe on the vine, and that she felt that, and that there was that drive. So you don't know what it's going to be like on set. I've worked with people who were not first-time filmmakers who had complete meltdowns on set, and so it was all the more sort of thrilling for Chloe to have the really preternatural control that she had over the set, over the decisions she was making, and over the process.
Luke, I hate to judge the character, but he's a pretty unlikable character, I think. But I do think that you managed to imbue him with a sense of humanity. Like, he felt very three-dimensional, and at times I felt bad for him, even though I didn't really want to. What is that process like of modulating your performance to make sure that you're not turning this, the antagonist of the film into a sort of mustache twirly villain? How do you find that line?
I think that in the way the story was built, you knew things were not going to go very well pretty early, and I knew I had to do some pretty horrific things as this character, and so my job is to try to put myself in that person's shoes as best I can. You can't always get all the way in, but I think that it was just clear that it was it was better if this was a human being, and that was in the writing itself. And then in the rehearsals that became clearer, and it was just clear that had he been just consumed by sort of malice from the first scene, it would be exhausting. And I think it's more interesting to study people like that. A sort of monstrous sociopathic person is just, an anomaly, and it's not that interesting to me. So how we're all sort of complicit in giving too much indulgence to the worst sides of ourselves is a lot more, I think, poignant and speaks to, it's probably more helpful or something. So Yeah, I don't know, some version of what I just said.
Well, I just want to add to, I mean, what I loved about Alden when we first spoke, he never judged the character. And, because if he came in already judging the character, I'm like, that's not a way into this movie, and that's not a very interesting version of the film. And what we had always talked about was, and trying to lean into it was, and I never judged it too. When I was like on set with him, I never wanted him to feel like I was judging the character. And when I was talking to him, I was like, we were always talking about how much pain he was in. And the more that we leaned into his pain, you know, because he's not, the feelings he's having don't make him a bad guy. You know, what he does with those feelings are not acceptable, you know, but the feelings themselves are not his fault. This is a societal, systemic problem that raises boys to believe that masculinity is an identity, when it's not. It's an energy, you know, and what I really wanted to show with this character was that Luke represents a certain generation, well, really many generations of men caught in the middle between wanting to adhere to a modern feminist society, but still having been raised on traditional ideas of masculinity. And like on the one hand, he adores Emily because she's intelligent, you know, he adores her because she's a killer. But because of the way he's raised, there's this feeling like he needs to get there first. And what I knew Alden, he would be able to give me that, you know, and lean into the duality of those emotions, the duality of loving her, but also wanting to hurt her at the same time, and the complexity of the struggle between those two things. And I just feel like he did that on a level that I could have never imagined with any other actor.
Let's talk about the ending for a minute. Let me back up. One thing I love about this film is the tone. Yeah, Act 2. I love the tone, and I love it because it really feels like anything can happen at any moment. You know, I think the movie totally could have ended in a bloodbath, like Fatal Attraction style, and I totally would have bought it because there's this threat of violence that's simmering underneath the entire film. And that's sort of why I think the ending works so well, in my opinion. It feels unexpected. How did you arrive there, and how did you know that was the right way to go? And was there another version at one point that you sort of were like, this doesn't quite feel right?
So for me, I knew the ending before I really knew the beginning, actually. Like I said, I set out to make a thriller about power dynamics between men and women on the ugliest level. So I think to really talk about the ending, you need to talk about what happens in the bathroom. And for me, the film always had to escalate to sexual assault, because ultimately sexual assault is not about sex, it's about power. And like I said, I wanted to do this on the ugliest level. And that was the only way for Luke to reclaim the power over Emily in that moment, is because he's physically stronger than her. So because it escalates to that, then for me the ending was, well, you know, it's on Emily to decide what she's going to do about it. So for me the ending was always about Emily reclaiming the power that Luke takes away from her, and just holding a man accountable. You know, and for me it's like, it didn't have to get violent if he had showed one sliver of, you know, recognition or accountability for the pain that he inflicted on her. But this is a man who's, you know, refuses to face that. I mean, that's what causes all the pain and destruction for not only her but also himself in the film. Like this is something that he's running from. But for me, like the whole movie really builds up to the line when she gets him to say I'm nothing. You know, because that's the moment that he finally acknowledges his own inferiority to her. And ultimately, I think more than being a film about female empowerment, this is really a film about male fragility. So that's where the film needed to end.
Wow. Good answer. How do I follow that up? Frantically scrolling through.
Any pranks on set?
Okay, here's one. It's, you know, just because the filmmaking process is so chaotic, I think it's rare that a film turns out exactly the way that you planned it, you know, when you first started out. Which sometimes I think can be for the best, because you get these happy accidents or moments that looking back, you're like, oh, I never would have got that. Can both of you point to something while making the film that you sort of discovered in the process, or that sort of looking back, you're like, oh, I'm really glad that horrible thing happened because we wouldn't have gotten X, or I wouldn't have discovered this facet of the character?
I can start. Well, a couple things. I will say, people don't realize, but we shot this film, just to start with the production aspect, we shot this film in Serbia. I know you guys probably got to the end credits and read the names and were like, what the fuck? Like, where did they shoot this? Yeah, we made this film independently. This is an indie film. And we went to Eastern Europe because we were able to put as much resources, you know, on the screen as possible over there, and we were able to get the shoot days over there that we wouldn't have gotten in New York with the budget we had. So starting with that, you know, I would say in terms of expectations, it was constantly, because you're working on a certain budget, you're constantly getting hit, as you know, every day with like building costs, for example, were just constantly going up. And then the producers would come to me and be like, well, you gotta cut 5 more pages, or you gotta, you know, condense these locations or whatever. So it was constant. I feel like every day it was just like just thinking about the film in a different way, or how can I retain what I want and what I envision while getting creative and protecting the film, the integrity of the film itself. But I would say one thing was like I had to cut like this whole sequence with her when she gets like a Lambo. Like she gets like they give her like this ridiculous Lambo in like one of the previous drafts, and she has this car that she doesn't want. You know, it's this male fantasy version of a toy that she doesn't want, and then she has to drive this thing drunk through Chinatown, try and park it, and it was like a whole thing. But ultimately we couldn't afford that, and so I was put in a corner, and it was like this whole thing, and my producers were pacing, and they were like, you know, because I was holding onto the Lambo with like everything. But ultimately being put in the corner, I just felt like it was that Spielberg moment with like when he sees the shark with Jaws, and it's just like, okay, this looks ridiculous. What are we gonna do now? But then he came up with the idea, well, if we don't see it, that's more terrifying. But it was only because the shark looked ridiculous and wouldn't work, you know. But it was kind of like the Lambo was that moment for me where I just had to simplify it, and it ended up being the check. And the check was more simple, but it was straight to the point. And I just think ultimately it was better for the story.
Yeah, I was going to say Serbia because we were fairly, it was mostly Serbian crew, and what that meant was it really intensified the sense of just kind of us in the center of this, and it was really me and Phoebe and Chloe and Menno, the DP, really doing this together. And we got a few days of rehearsal and got to do all these, you know, Chloe, you know, made that happen, which was fantastic. And so that was, it just helped kind of the intimacy. And by the time we got to filming the movie, it felt a little bit like Tetra, my first movie, where we had, spent these days together playing out like the first time we said I love you to each other, or her first day on the job, and I'm giving her a tour of the office. And there was this trust built in advance of shooting that then was really helpful.
I feel like it's so rare these days to have that rehearsal time. How do you like to run a rehearsal? You know, just like, what does that look like for film? Because I think we know, we kind of imagine play rehearsal, but a film is very different because it's so fragmented. So how do you even set that up?
So I mean, given the nature of this film, it's really confined to these 2 locations, the apartment and the office, which was intentional. The idea is that they can't escape each other. You know, they're kind of stuck between these 2 claustrophobic spaces, and that's part of what leads to such an explosive, final act is that it becomes this toxic So because of that, I think it just worked out. We were kind of lucky because we had those sets built, and we were able to rehearse on the actual sets. We had a week, just the three of us, and that was something that I told my producers from the beginning. I said this is the most important thing, because I'm never going to make a movie without rehearsals. Like, I don't understand directors that go in and I mean, good for them, but like, I wouldn't be able to sleep. I feel like it's not only a bonding time with your actors, but you run into problems, you run into things that don't work, you know, and how can to find out all these problems on the day of, and I just don't know how you make your days, or you know, just stuff like that. But having the rehearsal time, we were able to discover things and have time to discover things and implement those discoveries in a way that still kept us on schedule, and where when we got to the day of filming, we were able to do 10 takes and you know, or sometimes maybe more, and get to play, and where Alden gave me, you know, 20 different shades of a scene, and we just like that was because we rehearsed. And so we had time for about 80% to rehearse about 80% of the scenes, I think, and so we would just, you know, read through the words, kind of run them in half speed. We had an intimacy coordinator there from the beginning, it was really the greatest experience, and the greatest joy.
I was going to ask about the intimacy coordinator of it all, but they said I have 5 minutes left, so I feel like we should end on a more positive note. You kind of had one of those like fairy tale Sundance moments that I think everybody kind of dreams about, or maybe if you watched Entourage, that you kind of have seen a version of portrayed, where your film, you know, debuts to rapturous reviews and you sell to a, you know, huge distributor and all that stuff. I know a version of what that's like, but can you talk about what the real of that is like? Because it's really, I think, a lot weirder than people picture it.
Yeah, I think it was a disorienting yet magical weekend that was all pretty much a blur. But the first screening we had was Friday afternoon, so it's kind of right out of the gate. And we intentionally didn't want to have our movie on any lists, or like, we just kept it really under the radar. We didn't do any press before. We wanted the film. We wanted people to discover the film for themselves. Our screening was at the library, and it was, I have to say, the first like 5 minutes, I was dying, because they put us, you know, because they give the buyers the best seats, right, in the front, whatever. So they put us, all the filmmakers, by this giant fan, you know, in the back, where, you know, with ushers going in and out every 20 seconds. And you're there, and it's like, I killed myself to make this movie, you know, this is my moment. You're like, it's not loud enough, the film's not loud, like, these people are going in and out, is anyone paying attention, you know what I mean? But I will say, as soon as he came up with the blood on his face, and the laughter in the room, and then from there, it was like, it didn't matter that there was this giant fan in my ear just driving me fucking nuts, because the rest of the audience was in it. And I will say that screening was just the best. Like, I mean, it was honestly bonkers, and I would say one of the more batshit crazy screenings we had, because people were just like laughing, you know, just out of discomfort, and wooing and booing. Like when she breaks the ball over his head, they broke out into applause. And then at the end, when she says her last line, everyone started whistling. I mean, it was just a crazy screening. But I think what was, so coming out of it, I was upset, because I'm like, that sounded like shit. I worked so hard on the sound design, what the fuck, you know? But I was feeling the energy of that room, and the reactions was like, okay, people are feeling what I intended them to feel, and there was nothing better than that feeling. Obviously, the reviews and all the stuff that came out after, it was like they started rolling in, and yeah, you could tell people were already instantly wanting to talk about this film, which was incredibly exciting. I will say that one of the stranger parts of the whole experience was trudging through the snow, going to different condos of as people pitch, you know, as we were getting, you know, offers in for the movie, and you're trying to find, you know, like Netflix's cabin, and you're trudging through the snow, and then you go and you sit in the cabin and you get the pitch, and then you trudge through the snow and you find someone else's cabin, and this is in between, you know, press and all that stuff. So it's a wild, bizarre experience, but it was incredible. I think I slept 3 hours the whole weekend, but it was amazing.
Okay, last question. I usually hate this question, but I'm a fan, so I want to know what's next for both of you.
What is next? I'm doing festival circuit for this 15-minute film I directed called Shadow Brother Sunday. I haven't answered this question in so long, and everything that was next is now out. Ironheart Marvel series comes out, TBD, and then I'm doing a movie in January that I can't talk about, but that's it. Oh, and then I'm going to be doing, I have a theater space called the Huron Station Playhouse that we're going to do our first play in March.
And I'm writing another crazy movie, so get ready.
Thank you both so much. The film is so great, and